to the 2019 Guide to Technical Synoptic Assessment. My name is Alison Atkinson and I'm a Principal Moderator for City and Guilds Technicals. This presentation is the third in a series of bite-sized webinars which aims to guide and support centres in delivery, evidence collection and marking of the Technical Qualification Synoptic Assessment. The full set covers the following, and each will illustrate common pitfalls and make recommendations for best practice in centres. In Part 1, we went into the process of delivery of the synoptic assessment. Part 2 discussed the differences in learner-produced and centre-produced evidence. In this one, Part 3, we give guidance on marking and standardisation. And finally, in Part 4, we discuss the submission of evidence to City and Guilds via the moderation portal. These 4 webinars give general rather than subject-specific guidance. The purpose of them all is to support centre staff in the delivery of any of the City and Guilds technical synoptic assessments. Let's look at some of the documents required in the upload of evidence. We have PO forms or practical observation forms. These are used by tutors to record candidate evidence performance during practical observations. There is usually 1 per candidate per synoptic assessment, unless this has been otherwise specified in your synoptic pack. The candidate record form, or CRF, these are subject-specific and used by tutors and markers to capture the justification for marks awarded against each assessment objective. There should be 1 per candidate. The Declaration of Authenticity form, these are generic forms and there should be 1 per candidate. It should be signed by the candidate and a member of staff to demonstrate that the work is the learner's own. It also holds information on the amount of support provided during the assessment. The next 2 forms are generic and there should be only 1 uploaded per cohort per synoptic assessment. The Centre Standardisation Declaration form confirms that centres have undertaken internal standardisation for the marking of the synoptic assessment where there is more than 1 marker in the centre. And the personal interest form, which is used to provide information relevant to moderation. For example, when a marker has a personal interest in a candidate, perhaps they're their parent or other relation. So let's move on to the process of marking. Here's the marking grid, or an excerpt from it. It's an easy-to-use assessment tool, and once you're familiar with it, it becomes a very effective way of determining marks and differentiating between candidates. Each is specific to every qualification and gives examples of how candidates might show their knowledge, understanding, and skills. It itemises what learners are being marked against. We can see here in column 1, this shows the percentage weighting assigned to each assessment objective. These were set by industry experts when the qualification was written. Make sure you look at the relevant weighting of marks against each assessment objective and ask yourself, where will my candidates get the majority of their marks from? Column 2 shows the name of the assessment objective. There are 5 in total: knowledge, understanding, practical skills, bringing it all together, and attention to detail. There are a range of questions posed here to act as prompts to focus your mind on how a candidate might show their skill. Across the top row, there are marks, the minimum and maximum marks given to each of the bands. It must be noted that each of the bands sometimes has a wide range of marks, and thought must go into why marks are being awarded rather than simply placing candidates at the top or bottom of a band. Use the bands first and ask yourself which more accurately describes the candidate's skill. And after this, you can start to fine-tune your marking by looking at some of the examples in orange. The blue boxes show a generic description of the performance quality within each band. As we can see here in band 1, recall shows some weaknesses in breadth and/or accuracy. The orange boxes show qualification-specific examples of the qualities expected in each band. When discussing these band descriptors, it's important to remember they do not relate to pass, merit and distinction. The grade boundaries are set once per year after marks have been determined by City and Guilds. We sometimes see centre markers making the mistake of assigning 100% of marks in an AO because a candidate has shown commercial competency. We often see this in AO3. This would be ignoring the fact that some candidates do better than others and can show different strengths and weaknesses. Many candidates show a spiky profile where they excel at one objective but struggle with another. It's perfectly normal for a candidate to show good knowledge but not quite understand the subject so well. Or they could be good at one practical skill but not another. So when assigning marks, we should look at the full set of tasks holistically and ask the following questions. First of all, am I assigning marks in the correct assessment objective? How good is the evidence? This is where we assign a band. What makes it good or better? Is it the lower, middle or upper of the bands? Where are the good bits? So how can we justify where we're placing these candidates' marks? And then finally, we need to describe where those justifications lie. So what does evidence look like? We've got a range of evidence here, some of it candidate evidence and some of it centre produced. Candidates' evidence may look like this on the left. It could be photos of finished pieces, reports, evaluations, costing sheets, PowerPoint slides, etc. Centre produced evidence, seen on the right here, comes in the form of notes on practical performances and on the whole is written on a City and Guilds PO form. Here are two excerpts from a PO form to help you recognise the document. We're now going to look closely at how to mark the synoptic assignment. So you'll need to make sure you have the following documents to refer to. First of all, the marking grid. Then the full set of candidate evidence, because remember we need to look at all of the tasks. Thirdly, any centre-produced notes of practical performances or PO forms. And finally, you should have a CRF to hand to start writing down your notes and justifications. The candidate record form is used by centres to record and justify the marks they're awarding to the full set of tasks. Take a look at this example. Although the font is small, it's obvious that the centre marker has given descriptive details of why marks have been awarded, and these are fully justified with examples of where in the evidence the strengths and weaknesses lie. Here are some common pitfalls. Sometimes centres mark the candidate rather than the evidence. Centres do not only attribute marks based on the candidate's performance on the task, but also what they know about how the candidate has performed throughout the year. Moderators sometimes see comments on the PO form and the CRF referring to whether the candidate has been a good student or been a pleasure to teach or has always been late to class. These sorts of comments make the moderator question whether the assessment of the set of tasks in the synoptic has been carried out correctly and the marking grid has been used as the assessment tool. Here's a tip. Expectations of students should not come into any judgments made of their final synoptic set of tasks, as this is a summative assessment. When describing a candidate's performance during a practical task, try to write to the person who was not in the room, who saw none of what you saw. Relate these descriptions to the band descriptors on the marking grid to enable the moderator to pin down the judgment of that activity. They will then use this to assign marks. Here's some advice on completing a CRF, and we have one here which could do with some more detailed justification and to be related better to the tasks. They should identify aspects of them which gain or lose marks. So if task 1 was very comprehensive, but task 2 lacked some detail, this should show up here as some inconsistencies, placing it in band 2, the centre's judgment. However, when moderated, this piece came out as deserving more marks than this. See the PM comments above. This shows how important it is for you to be fully conversant with the marking grid, as you could be letting your students down by describing them in the wrong way and placing marks incorrectly. AO4 can be a difficult one. AO4 is bringing it all together. It can be very difficult to mark, and many people have reported confusion with this in AO2. This is perfectly understandable, as understanding AO2 does in fact come into this AO. However, the difference is how this relates to the things they do during their full set of tasks. How well has the candidate used their full set of skills, understanding and knowledge to deal with the synoptic set of tasks? Is the work showing that she's able to work out the solutions to these tasks being guided by what she's been taught? Is she drawing on theory to inform practice? Are her decisions based on her experience, and are they plausible? Do you feel confident in what she's doing? Can she do this independently? Can they use the theory that they've been taught to work out solutions to the range of things they've been asked to do? Let's see what the guidance in the marking grid says. This piece has been awarded 16 marks, so it's mid to high band 3. We need to look at the evidence to see where these justification comments lie and if we agree with them. But the marker has given some pointers of where to look, and she's referred to the band descriptors very well, so you can place hooks on her judgment. This is very good practice. This slide shows a typical example of incorrect use of the marking grid for AO3. The PO form below states that the candidate lacks initiative and struggles with more complex tasks, and that the candidate needs to practice more to build up confidence in restraint. This suggests that practical skills are not yet second nature and would therefore not be awarded top band. This candidate is better placed within the middle band. Centre evidence across different PO forms is a mixed picture and does not describe a top band 3 performance in AO3. See the marking grid above. Centre marks for this candidate were given as top band 3, which was difficult for the moderator to validate. So here's a summary of how to use the marking grid. First of all, use the contextualise examples for the AO and make sure you consider the full range of performance possible. Next, judge whether the evidence or performance for that AO fits the top, middle or bottom of this range. Using the generic aspects of the marking grid, the blue bits, do this first, then use the orange bits to gain additional descriptions which are contextualised for the industry. Use these to support your decisions and start to reference where in the evidence you base this decision. Is it in the slide she's produced? Is it on page 2 and 3 of her report? Is it in her overall practical tasks? Consider the group of candidates in each band and rank them based on their performance in that AO. Decide on marks for each and place them on a scale in the correct rank order. Spread them out appropriately and according to the descriptors. And then finally, once you've added up the marks, go back to the band descriptors to help you verify the position of the cohort on that scale of 0 to 60. Centres often have different members of staff who carry out observations. Their descriptions of the quality of performance can vary greatly. One person's good is another person's excellent. Standardisation should iron out these differences and, if done regularly, should ensure that the centre marking is consistent, reliable and accurate. Where centre marking is not standardised, there's an increased risk that the moderation process will result in adjustments being made. So it's important to understand and implement standardisation correctly in your centre. It's the lead marker or the IQA's role to ensure standardisation takes place and to ensure a common standard has been agreed and is being adhered to during marking. During pre-standardisation, it's recommended that all tutors are included in early discussions about the use of the marking grid, whether or not they have a marking role. This is in order for them to understand the basis of marking for the qualification. This way they can help their candidates to prepare for summative assessment by practicing bringing their skills and knowledge together to complete a problem, or helping them to learn how to explain and justify their choices in terms of subject knowledge. Consideration for pre-standardisation should be given to the following: how evidence will be captured, how to identify which photograph belongs to which candidate, and how to annotate those photographs to show the task number and any details such as before, during and after. Another pre-standardisation activity could be to look at file naming conventions that will be used to ensure easy identification of evidence to be uploaded for the moderation sample. How to ensure that candidates capture the right things with photographic evidence, and whether there needs to be someone with a specific role for capturing photographic evidence in addition to the marker. How to ensure that notes about the candidate's performance are descriptive in a way that supports qualitative judgments by the markers, but also by moderators. For example, tick lists are not appropriate. On this final slide, we discuss standardisation. Standardisation is required for each assessment version and must include all markers. It must always take place using complete candidate evidence, as that evidence would be presented for moderation, using the current assignment for that year. Individually, markers should mark in draft a common sample of candidate evidence using the candidate record form to justify their marks. The common sample should be chosen to give coverage of the range of performance expected and to give examples of work that may be at the borderline between marking bands on the marking grid. Where there are discrepancies in marks given, markers should examine these collectively and come to a consensus in interpreting the marking grid. If there is any disagreement, the lead marker or IQA will have the final say. There should not be an agreement to disagree. A final mark must be agreed. Markers are encouraged to keep notes during standardisation and develop shared reference material to support them in maintaining the agreed standard throughout marking. Once the standard has been agreed, further common pieces of evidence should be marked to confirm closer agreement has been reached. I'd like to thank you for your time. I hope this has been useful. Please watch out for part 4 in the series of bite-sized webinars.